was. Tell me a little bit about like what was it like working on something that was like allowed you to explore and to like express part of your culture.
Yeah, I mean, this was the really great thing about Kung Fu, honestly, is that it was the first show of its kind, not just because of the predominantly Asian cast, but also because it was kind of rebooting something and trying to right a wrong. I mean, that wasn't, I think, what they set out to do. But it was just a really fantastic opportunity for me to explore what the new narrative is for, a predominantly Asian cast. And what I really love about the show and about what Christina Kim and Bob Behrens, the producers and showrunners, do, is they're not trying to make an Asian story. They're not trying to make a Chinese story. They're trying to tell a human story, and that's a really important goal that I think Hollywood at large, could really learn from. So it was really fantastic to be able to explore the authentic instruments. Something that I felt puts us in the show and puts us in. In the setting of the story for some of the mythology and the legend. I think that's really important. But then also there's places in the score where it's not culturally specific because it's about a human story, a universal, quest of trying to find one's purpose or, what is the right thing to do. So, yeah.
On that note too, I've talked with a lot of like comic book artists and stuff, and it's like when you have a lead that is female, that is Asian, you aren't like going for that aim, right? Like you aren't doing that. So like, how does that translate into like making music for it too? It's like you're not thinking, okay, I got a 30-year-old lead, he's a black male, whatever. Like you're not thinking about that. So like, how does it like, okay, this person feels like this, they behave like this. Does that translate over to like making the story?
I mean, that's a good question too. But it's for me, it's about the story. Mm-hmm. So it's like if the story is touching upon maybe an immigrant, like maybe talking about how the parents are, they're immigrants, and they talk about the racism that they felt or the struggles that come into this country, just like what their credentials were there. Now they can't do the same thing, and I think those are times that I do think about. I mean, it's just even then, it's still about the story. It's like thinking about, this is actually important to comment on this. But I don't tend to see that, like see the color or see the race or that kind of thing. It really has to stick with how does it support the story. And there are times when it's like, we need the percussion or we need the air hoop. I think those are times to use it, and other times not. But no, I don't really see it.
With that too, I got to start Kung Fu. I haven't finished it yet. When the villain comes in, or when she's having conversations like with her brother about certain things, the mood of the villain, the mood of some of these conversations, how does that play into effect? Like when
I think villains are like my favorite to write for because I think there's something about they're very complex because they're human, right? In this case, they're human. I've worked on shows where that's not the case. But in the case of the character Jalan, who's the villain of the first season, and the second season, I think there's just something very complex about her, especially because they take the time to go into the story and give us a reason why she's like this. So it's like, it comes from actually a place of like, pain in her youth, but I think that's why I like to write villains, because there's always something complex about them, the emotion, and there's their anger or their nefarious deeds, kind of thing. But yeah, for Jalan in particular, I kind of came up with this, high-pitched, screeching air hoop sound for her that I didn't even realize was going to be the thing, but it was more like, what's something that just really announces her on screen? Not that she needs it, because she's amazing when she, enters screen, but something that just, something that's just going to really announce her and her, that it can be really attached sound-wise to her. So it came up with this, like I said, this really high-pitched, almost like a rock air hoop kind of thing. It's, I don't know, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it's fun.
When you got introduced to being able to work on Kung Fu, you were working on a lot of other things. Tell me kind of how did you balance some of it?
Balance? I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out.
Right?
but it all comes out of deadlines, right? I mean, if you think about it in a very utilitarian way, it's a deadline, so you kind of work backwards from there. But it is a challenge. But I am very careful. I know, I think it's important to be careful that I'm not overextending myself, because obviously that hurts the music, that hurts even the process, the creative process of it. But it was great working on that show in particular, and what I particularly like about it is that I didn't get it because Asian female lead,
Exactly.
Asian female. I was like there's a relationship. I actually knew Christina from we were working on a show called Blind Spot for 5 years before. So it was when she went off to make this show, and just was like, hey, you should work together again. So I love it. There's a relationship there, which I think is really, in my opinion, like that's where the collaborative. I think that's where the magic is. It's not just like, let's get a person who looks like this on screen, because as an artist, it's like my art isn't necessarily, or music isn't necessarily going to sound Asian influenced simply because I'm Chinese, But yeah, it's the balance of it. I think is a challenge. But I think it's, when you're inspired this much, it becomes a lot easier. I think.
And then talk a little bit more about that, because I feel like what you're naturally called to, you kind of attracted and created for yourself. Like you were saying, like with Kung Fu, there was naturally just a lot of Asian women that just happened to work on the show. When they made Moana, I'm not sure they were looking for like, let's find an all Polynesian cast for this, right? Like that's probably not how it happened. So
I wouldn't know, but
right, but like for that idea, like how has it been for you just creating opportunities for yourself to, being attracted to stuff that you want to work on this past?
Right now, I definitely, this seems like a generic answer, but I like a good story. I think it's like, I do look for ways that I can contribute, because if it's something like, wow, I'm really going to have to, if I don't really do that thing, or I think sometimes if I don't relate to that story, I probably shouldn't do it, just because I don't, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, it doesn't speak to you.
Yeah, so I do like to take on, I also like to take on projects that are like really committed to a style, very stylized, or they're really, they have a strong point of view. I think it's why I kind of gravitated originally towards superhero shows. I don't think I gravitated toward them. I think that was just like, I was sort of landed in that world. But I think I liked it because there's shows that, stories that they have heart, they have emotion, but they also have comedy, they also have action, they have adventure, and it kind of touches upon all that. So I do like stories that kind of touch upon all those types of, exciting things, entertainment that people like to get lost in and sucked into.
When you're working on a project, how much do you get to work with the actors? Or how much is influenced about like, they just did that motion, I want to create this kind of sound and this kind of feel for it? How much do you get to work with them?
Surprise? Okay, so in the past, like almost never.
Yeah.
Because they've done their job, they're so far out of it by the time I come in. But actually on Kung Fu, what was great about the second season, and I won't be giving anything away, what was great about it is that there is something about the bell. So you know about the bell, and so they actually reached out to me when they were in the writing process, and there was a place where the bell was going to be used, and then this is storyline, but there was something that's going to go happen, but it's a musical. It's not a musical, but it's a musical, clue, basically. And so we talked about, I was able to talk with the writers and discuss with them how I think we should do this, or here, I'll plant the seeds in the score. And then there's another actress who's that I've been sort of just exchanging back and forth, because she had to do something on screen, something musical that I had to write and do it. And so I contacted her, and it was cool though. It's like, wow, it's really important to me that if there's something musical on screen, I love it when they reach out to me as the co-host. It's like, let's bring this full circle and tie it in really tightly. So usually never, but now that I've met a few of them, on Zoom, or I've even done a couple of interviews with them and stuff too, that it's like it makes me wanna like work even harder, to write something specifically for them, especially when they say, hey, I'm listening, I'm paying attention. And now that I know that you're writing stuff, when I do scenes, I'm going to think about the music that you're doing. So it's actually really special, and I'm kind of surprised it hasn't happened more in the past.
Yeah.
But I just think that this was something magical about the show Kung Fu. This is really great about that too. They're really open to that. The actors are, and the writers.
Yeah, I think it makes a production a lot better, and like it makes it much more memorable when writers and everyone can work together and collaborate. Because I feel like it keeps everybody inspired and creative.
I agree, and you can feel it. Like even if you don't always know exactly what you're hearing or what you're seeing and how it's connected, you can sense that there's a connection. I always like that. That's good. I think it's good for audience viewing. It's good for storytelling. I love seeing that in movies. I love like when I'm watching that movies or TV. It's like, oh, that's cool. You know that there was a back and forth there. You know, yeah.
What made you decide that you wanted to follow a path of music, and like how did you get into like writing scores for productions? Because that's a very specific, like, but fun, really favorite thing.
Very specific. And when I started, I like when I realized I wanted to do it, there was like it was so difficult to even learn and research like what is this? Didn't really have internet the same way that we have it now. But I'm a classically trained pianist, and so the music was there from the beginning. And I think because I just sort of knew that being a composer, because we studied my composers in classical music, and so I kind of knew that was something that you do, or that something that someone can do. And then I saw Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Kevin Costner, and a really phenomenal score by Michael Kamen. And I had just never really heard music like that before. I had just never, that moved me, that matched the picture and really evoked all this emotion. And I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I was young. I was like 12 or 13 or something. So, I just kind of had that in my mind. Like, I'm going to study this and get through high school and college and then all the rest of it. So I did actually do an undergrad in composition theory. And then I did graduate school in specifically film scoring. But I saw that movie and I was like, that's the score. I bought the soundtrack and listened to it, played it over and over. And I'm like, I don't even know how to do this, what I'm listening to, but that's what I want to do. And so I just pushed and got out to Los Angeles, which is probably don't really have to do that as much anymore, but this is the place. This is where we're making the magic. So, yeah, but I was one of those kids who was like, I want to do that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Before we get you out of here, I think we're getting close to time. They mentioned in the panel what were some of the scores that like changed your life, and instantly I thought of several. I believe you said you had several in mind.
Yeah, it was definitely Michael Kamen scored to Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And I did mention on the panel, but like even like in sort of my older, more adult years and stuff, as I was kind of grew up on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so I'm kind of growing up on that show, and then watch it well into like when I was in school, and I'm like, wow, this is just a really it was kind of the first time I really realized like music kind of has to do this because like while the show was amazing, had someone gone in a different direction, it would have landed differently, and so it's not only just the power of music and the influence of it, but it's like working on superhero shows or kung fu, the things that have mystical qualities, things that are otherworldly and otherwise unbelievable, need music to do something too. So anyway, that score, and just Jerry Goldsmith, and all of his music as well. It's these are John Williams. These are people that just are master craftsmen at their job. And it's like we kind of all grew up on these emotional experiences, and all the greats.
And knowing that this what you do has the potential to really affect somebody for years later. Are you thinking about that when you're creating, or you just, like you said, just focusing on the elements of the story when you're making it?
Yeah, because it's kind of in the moment. It's like, again, it's for the story, because you never know, even when you're working on something, you never know if it's going to be, if it's going to land or resonate. You never know if it's going to get a second season or it's going to get a sequel. You never know if it's actually, sometimes I don't even know if it's going to like theaters or anything, because you just, that's up in the air. But no, I do actually think it's really important to stay in that moment, because if you start creating for some other agenda, I think that comes through too. Like either like you're trying too hard, or wow, you didn't try hard enough, or something. I don't know. I just think it's important to like stay in the moment and just do what's right for that story, and what you're feeling as a creative in that moment too. I think it's important. That's what I try to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I had one really quickly. My wife wanted to know if you could give your 15-year-old self one piece of advice or warning about pursuing a career in music, what would you say?
Man, I would say,
I know, a hard one.
well, I mean, I would certainly never say don't do it. I would say, but for me, I'd probably say I wish I'd gotten here sooner. Like, you know, I wish I'd like maybe just been a little bit less timid about having a point of view in my music. You know, just go right in. So I would try to have done it sooner. I think, as in, don't hesitate. Like, just go for it.
Oh,
So maybe that,
thank you.
and save your money.
Yeah.
And eat your vegetables.
Thank you.
Yeah,